This little indie horror title is one of the most terrifying games that you never heard of. If you're in the mood this Halloween season to try out some indie horror games to play, then you've come to the right place because this obscure little horror game just very recently released right in time for Halloween. And this game is called World of Horror. So what is World of Horror? Well, this game is a 2-bit point-and-click roguelike RPG horror game made by one guy doing this as a passion project while also working as a part-time dentist. This developer was heavily inspired off of H.P. Lovecraft and Junji Ito's works, and you can immediately tell from the terrifying and disgusting body horror and occultism that this game makes liberal use of. World of Horror incorporates a bunch of classic horror themes like Lovecraftian, Japanese folklore, body disfigurement, and so much more depicted in this really unique art style that's all apparently done with an MS Paint, which is really impressive. Now, if you're looking for a more in-your-face horror game that looks to get a jump scare out of you every few minutes, then you're looking in the wrong place because this game is not that at all. Instead, this game takes a more subtle approach to horror by using the atmosphere and environmental storytelling to build an overwhelming sense of dread and anxiety. It doesn't try to scare you in the traditional sense, but more so tries to keep you on edge at all times with the tense atmosphere that it creates through excellent ambient music and freaky imagery. This game is a constant slow and steady downward spiral into the abyss until you reach complete and utter madness at the end, where you feel like everything in this world is out to get you, where you feel like you can no longer tell friend from foe and foe from, well, this thing. And that's what makes this such a great horror game, because it doesn't rely on big scary monsters jumping up in your face to get a cheap spook out of the player. This game doesn't seek out to constantly terrorize you, instead it seeks to give you a sense of overwhelming despair. Throughout the game, you'll investigate a series of random scenarios within the city of Shiokawa, Japan in order to learn more about the strange occurrences happening within the city and put a stop to whatever is causing them before the world succumbs to doom, with each occurrence getting progressively weirder and weirder than the last. In the world of horror, you'll encounter a plethora of scenarios from eldritch cultist rituals to haunted houses to murder mysteries. There are a bunch of strange things happening within the city that all lead to something more sinister, more otherworldly. Despite that though, I don't think you'll ever be scared in this game like you would in other horror games like Outlast or Resident Evil, but there will probably be moments where you'll do a double take and just go, what the f is that? And I think that's what this game really does best. It doesn't try to get a jump scare out of you every other minute. All it does is just try to show you some really disturbing imagery that's only slightly nightmare inducing. Now, the horror is all well and good, but how is the gameplay? Well, like I mentioned earlier, World of Horror is a point-and-click roguelike RPG similar to old-school point-and-click adventure games back in the early 2000s, except in this game, every run is completely randomized. That's right, every single thing from the items to the enemies to the strange occurrences happening all over the city are all random. Now, this game doesn't really have a story per se, just an overarching background that kind of contextualizes what's going on. Like I said, this is a roguelike game, meaning that when you first start out a run, you can play either as a random character or one of your choosing, which will determine what perks, items, and stats you start out with. Whenever you begin a run, your world will be affected by an old god, which basically acts as a permanent modifier for your entire run. Like here in this run, I got an old god that made everyone do double damage, including enemies. You'll then get a little background of your starting character, and then be tasked with investigating the strange supernatural events happening all over the city and put a stop to whatever is causing them. Now, every run you'll be given 4 random investigations that you'll have to complete that will allow you to reach the end of the game. And each one of these investigations will vary from finding out the source of disappearing people, to searching for urban legends, to exploring haunted places. When you begin an investigation, you'll search for clues to solve the mystery by investigating various different locations, which can lead to a number of random events that could happen. And depending on your choices in those events, can end up either benefiting you or harming you. For example, in one of my investigations, I was searching a dilapidated mansion, and in one of the rooms I found a demonic tome wrapped in human flesh that contained a vast amount of unholy knowledge about the eldritch gods. So I did what any normal person would do, and I took the creepy looking book and put it in my pocket, which I then accidentally scratched myself on a rusty nail, which somehow put a hole in my abdomen, leaving me with an exposed ribcage for the rest of the run unless I get it treated. Stuff like this makes every run interesting because the game tries to screw you over at every step of the way, and you've got to learn how to manage your health and psyche as you barely survive these close combat encounters. And yes, there is combat in this game that's, for the most part, pretty simple. I know all the stuff on the screen looks like a lot to take in at a glance, and the tutorial that's supposed to teach you how to play isn't really that helpful, but it's actually pretty easy once you play with it for like 10 minutes. The combat is a sort of turn-based system where you queue up a number of moves and then launch them to resolve the actions for that turn. Like you could queue up 3 attacks, or heal a bunch of times, or you can queue a balance of attack, utility, and defense each turn. Now admittedly, I pretty much queued up the same sequence like 90% of the time, and it got me through the entire game just fine. And like any RPG, you have a bunch of stats for your character depending on which one you're playing and how you've built them. You also have your stamina and psyche to keep in mind while you play, because if any one of them goes down, it's pretty much game over. The game is kind of confusing at first, but it's really not that complex, and it's super easy to make your character overpowered pretty quickly. For example, in my first run, I played as this girl with high dexterity, which let me dodge a lot in combat and basically trivialize a lot of the enemies. By the end of the game, I was pretty much easily dodging every attack enemies threw at me because I had built so much dexterity on my character that the game felt like a breeze. You're also given a bunch of tools to let you deal with these common encounters, as well as a bunch of powerful items that you can find throughout the world if you go out of your way to obtain them. Like, I got this one healing spell that lets me sacrifice my EXP in order to recover my reason, which was incredibly OP and carried me through the end of the game. Or the meat cleaver I found that let me do so much damage to the enemies and basically made short work of every combat encounter. Because of the randomness, no 2 runs will ever be exactly the same, and with the high amount of variance that can happen in each run, it basically gives you hours upon hours of replayable content, and that's what makes World of Horror such an addicting game. Overall though, if you're looking for a small indie point-and-click horror game with roguelike elements and a charming art style that doesn't try to jump scare you and is massively inspired by the works of Junji Ito and H.P. Lovecraft, then I think you might be interested in World of Horror. The roguelike elements in this game allows it to have a bunch of variance within it that keeps the game feeling mostly fresh for each run. Although admittedly it could get a bit repetitive here and there, but for the retail price of $20, I think this is a pretty decent pickup for a weekend or two. But that's just me. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree? Let me know down below and make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content in the future. See ya.